Imagine a structure more magnificent than any temple in Egypt, a sanctuary of knowledge, philosophy, and thousands of ancient scrolls. And on one scorching afternoon, that sanctuary fell not to time, but to human hands. The Serapeum of Alexandria, the final masterpiece of the ancient world's intellectual glory. Built by the Ptolemaic kings, revered by philosophers, guarded by scholars. Here, mathematics, astronomy, and Hellenistic mysticism met. A place where knowledge itself was sacred. But the 4th century CE dragged Alexandria into a great storm. A city that once served as the world's beacon became a battlefield of ideologies. Political, religious, and social tensions filled its narrow streets. The turmoil in Alexandria was not merely a clash of religions. It was a collision of political ambitions, economic interests, and competing communal identities. Greeks, Egyptians, Romans, Jews, and Christians. Each group carried its own power, structure, and agenda. And in the middle of this chaos stood Hypatia, philosopher, mathematician, astronomer, respected by all circles. The daughter of Theon, a lecturer of the Library of Alexandria and a mathematician, she was trained from youth in the sciences. A woman of brilliance unmatched in her age. She taught in her home, in libraries, in public halls. To many, she was the last voice of clarity. In a city sinking into fanaticism, but her influence unsettled powerful men. Hypatia, though neutral, was close to Orestes, the Roman governor, fascinated by her lessons in astronomy. Orestes was locked in a bitter conflict with Bishop Cyril. The cause, politics. Cyril, ambitious and calculating, disliked their closeness. Orestes, a secular administrator, resisted religious interference in governance. To him, Hypatia, a pagan intellectual, was an obstacle to the spread of Christian authority in Alexandria. To certain extremist groups, she was no longer a scholar, but a symbol of the pagan world, and a barrier to their rising power. When Emperor Theodosius V issued edicts limiting pagan practices, the Serapeum's fate grew fragile. Tensions erupted after waves of civil conflict between pagan and Christian communities, clashes that left casualties on both sides. The takeover or destruction of the Serapeum was not a single event, but part of a spiraling cycle of violence involving multiple factions. As the rioting crowds gathered, dust rose like fog over the marble steps. The colossal pillars echoed, not with hymns or debates, but with shouts of chaos. People pushed, screamed, stumbled. Ancient statues that had endured centuries began to crack. Thousands of papyrus scrolls fluttered in the hot desert wind. Fragments of the great statue of Serapis crashed to the stone floor, its shattering sound marking the end of an era. When imperial forces finally intervened, the Serapeum was evacuated and seized, then demolished or stripped of its function as a temple. Modern historiography views this not as a victory nor a single tragedy, but as a shift in power structures, the birth of new religious norms, and the sunset of classical civilization. Thus the Serapeum stands in history, not merely as a ruined building, but as a symbol of a world transitioning from the classical age to early Byzantine Christianity. One gray morning, as Hypatia returned from the Mausion, the streets felt unnervingly silent. The political whispers, once confined to corners of churches and markets, had now taken physical form. An extremist group confronted her. No debate, no trial, only blind fanaticism, and a woman swept into the violent current of history. She could not stop. Inside a religious building, that should have been a sanctuary, Hypatia was torn from the world she loved. A world of logic, numbers, stars, and tolerance. What followed was a horrifying silence. The bishop's men seized Hypatia, dragged her through the streets, and tortured her. They burned her, scraped her flesh with oyster shells. She was stripped, beaten with tiles, and her body was dismembered. News of her death spread through Alexandria. Her students wept, Scholars fell silent, even those who never knew her, felt as though a light had been extinguished from the city. Her death marked more than the end of a life. It marked the end of an era, the fading of classical rationality, slowly drowned by a new tide of power. Yet though her body vanished, her legacy never died. Every page of mathematics, every astronomical instrument, every question about the universe echoes her spirit still. The philosopher is gone, but her mind lives on, across the centuries yet to come.